Alright, all you glorious gamers out there. Welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And genuinely thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. I know I say this every week, but it genuinely does mean a lot, and thank you if you've taken that time to go and do it. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson, with me as always, in a new location, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going very well, Mark. Yeah, I am here indeed in a new location. As I mentioned last week, I have been moving house. I have finally properly moved house, and I'm no longer in lockdown cupboard.
He's in a room, people.
Great.
He's in a real-sized room for a man.
It is. I can actually move around. I can put my elbows out. It's a whole new world, Mark. So yeah, I'm doing this from a brand new space. So apologies for any odd noises that I've yet to detect in the new space. But yeah, I'll be working it out a bit more over the next few weeks. It has been a rather busy last sort of 10 days, so I haven't quite found the time to properly put the place through its paces, but hopefully I'm coming across loud and clear.
Nice one, man. I'm very happy that you're no longer on lockdown cupboard, because God save me, the amount of noises I had to edit out from that cupboard list was unbelievable. So I'm hoping that this is also making my life better as well as making your life better.
I live to please.
Anyway, Liz, what have you been playing this week?
Not a lot, to be honest, this week, Mark. Obviously, as I say, the move has been a lot more taxing than I imagined it was going to be for some reason. So I've basically just been finishing off Resident Evil 7, which I have now done. I pretty much said everything that I think I need to say about it last week. I had the sort of final hour to play, more or less. I found that end section more enjoyable than I was led to believe that I might have done. It's a wee bit more actiony towards the very end of the game. Not the best final boss encounter, but it was kind of more...
Not. The actual final boss encounter isn't great, but other than that, the game is fantastic.
The final set piece was a bit more just like the final point rather than the climactic battle. You know, it was sort of just like wrapping everything up. So I thought it was good overall. I really enjoyed it. I thought the move to first person and all that was great. And then so yeah, I'm just really looking forward to getting started with Resident Evil 8, which I'm hoping to do soon. And yeah, as I said last week, I will be playing Returnal very shortly. I just have literally not found the time. The only time I've thought to play it has been quite late at night, and then I've thought, well, there's no bloody point in playing it now because I'll never get anywhere.
No, that's true. You do need a run. Well, I will say, Lewis, that early doors, if you want to just put an hour into it here or there, you're probably fine, because you will probably die within that hour anyway, when you're first starting out the game. So it's not until maybe later on in the game where you are trying to go for like big runs and start saying, no, I want to do this now, you know, where you need to have a bit of time to yourself to be able to go and do that, you know.
What about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Well, Lewis, I have been playing Resident Evil 8, or Resident Evil Village. I still am not entirely sure what we should be calling it. And completed it, believe it or not. Having said that, the game is not very long. It's only 12 and a half hours, or that's how long it took me to finish it anyway, and I wasn't exactly rushing, so yeah, it's not the longest game in the world. But man, I really enjoyed it. It was really good. I think that the way in which the game is designed is sort of Metroidvania-esque, in the way that a lot of these Resident Evil games sort of are to a certain extent, but I think this one felt it more so because you were always returning to the village again and again and again, you know? And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the level design. I enjoyed all of the boss encounters, I think, or by and large anyway, and I enjoyed a lot of the new characters in the game, like particularly the Duke is amazing, and Lady Dimitrescu, or as she's better known, the sexy vampire lady, are fantastic characters. Both of them are really, really good. One fairly minor criticism I have of the game is that it didn't look as good as I thought that it might, which is an incredibly minor criticism for me because I basically don't care about stuff like that. But coming off the back of Returnal, you can tell a bit that this is a last-gen game, you know, because Returnal looked so good. One thing I will say, though, Lewis, is that I am very, very glad indeed that I went back to play Resident Evil 7 before playing Village, because there were points in the story that I'm not sure I would have known what was happening hadn't I played Resident Evil 7 first. So, ladies and gentlemen, that might be something to consider before you dive into Resident Evil Village. If you haven't played 7, then it might actually be worth doing from a narrative perspective, I would say. But I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it is quite short, so you take that into consideration as well. But for me, fantastic. Really, really enjoyed it.
Good stuff, yeah, really glad to hear it. It sounds like kind of the same critiques that have come out from reviewers and stuff as well, so, it sounds like a really great game and a bit of an expansion on what 7 was doing and a move into that action-y genre, but I did think when I played the demos that it didn't look as crisp and as nice as I thought it was going to either, including the Maiden demo that was made specifically for PS5. I remember playing that and thinking, it's nice, but it's not really mind-blowing,
yeah,
so it's
it
interesting.
Certainly wasn't blowing me away, whereas Returnal was like, holy shit, what is happening here? It is so crazy to look at, whereas Resident Evil just didn't look like that, but it wasn't even that, like the textures clearly weren't as high quality and whatever. I was a bit underwhelmed with how it looked in terms of it being a next-gen game, but it sort of isn't a next-gen game, so I'm forgiving it for that. But that is incredibly minor criticism. I cannot emphasise that enough. I basically don't care about that. It just felt like something I should say when I was talking about it. It did not detract from my enjoyment of the game at all. What I will say on the subject of it being more actiony, I didn't mind that at all. You are definitely in a lot more encounters in this game than you were in 7 by quite a considerable margin. There was one section towards the end of the game, and people who have played the game will know precisely the section that I'm talking about, where it is action up to the eyeballs, and that takes it like way, way, way too far. Fortunately, that section was very short, but overall, for most of your time playing the game, it's a more actiony Resident Evil 7. It still has all that tension, all that atmosphere. By and large, you're just in more enemy encounters, and I really enjoyed it for that, to be honest.
Good stuff. And just between 7 and 8, do you have a preference? Do you lean either way particularly?
Oh, that's a good question, Lewis. That is a good question. They will be so closely linked in my mind now that it will be difficult for me to differentiate between the two. I think that I lean more towards the actiony game. Therefore, I am tempted to say 8, but that also might be a bit of recency bias just creeping in there. Not really sure. But 7 is very, very good as well. Like, I really would genuinely struggle to pick a favourite between the two of them. I would probably say 8, but it's very, very close. Like, to the point where it basically doesn't matter.
Fair enough, yeah.
Anyway, Lewis, on that note, time for the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1. There seems to be a fairly substantiated rumour that Netflix are looking to get into video games, Lewis. This comes from tech website The Information, who first broke the story that Netflix wanted to hire an executive to oversee their expansion into gaming. This was later corroborated by Reuters, and apparently Netflix have already approached multiple veteran game industry executives about this position. The Information has said that Netflix is considering a bundle, quotes, of games via subscription like Apple Arcade, but it does seem as though these plans are currently pretty surface level and are very much in flux. A spokesperson for Netflix made this statement to Polygon.
Our members value the variety and quality of our content. It's why we've continually expanded our offering, from series to documentaries, film, local language originals and reality TV. Members also enjoy engaging more directly with stories they love, through interactive shows like Bandersnatch and UV Wild, or games based on Stranger Things, La Casa de Papel and To All the Boys. So we're excited to do more with interactive entertainment.
So that, to me, is nearly but not quite a confirmation, do you know what I mean? That they are looking to do something here in terms of like interactive entertainment. As the statement says, they have dabbled in games a little bit before with Bandersnatch, etc. But this feels like they are looking beyond that fairly straightforward choose your own adventure using your TV remote style of gaming. This feels like something much more substantial, Netflix have also made a lot of original content based on video games as well, thinking specifically of Castlevania and the new Dota animations, the Witcher live action series. Magic the Gathering, Sonic the Hedgehog, LoL and Resident Evil are all also getting Netflix adaptations of some description, and The Witcher is getting an animated spin-off as well based on the live action series, I believe. So they're doing a lot with video games already.
There's the Cuphead show as well, yeah.
Oh, the Cuphead show, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I suppose the thing here is that Netflix have a leg up on Google and Amazon to a lesser extent, but that they already have this enormous platform that is nearly synonymous with streaming. Now, I know that Amazon have Amazon Prime, but it's nowhere near as ubiquitous as Netflix is, not even close, I would argue. So theoretically, on your already massive streaming platform, all you would have to do is get some deal together with Microsoft to use Azure in the back end. Although maybe they already have streaming technology good enough to stream video games, I don't know. then you make a controller like Stadia and away you go, sort of thing, you know? The difference being that Netflix don't need to find an audience. Netflix already have an enormous audience, and then they can just slap down these games in front of you and go, want this too? As opposed to Google, which had to convince everyone that this was a platform worth being on. Netflix don't need to do that so much. They don't, you know, they just don't.
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's really hard to know what direction Netflix will go with this because, like you say, Mark, their statement feels tantamount to an admission that this is happening. Something in this gaming space is going to happen. But I wouldn't be stunned if it remains at that Bandersnatch level. You know, it's some sort of interactive TV, but maybe sort of more in a video game style than that, or not directly connected to a show that already exists. But if they are serious about this, and like you say, they should have the infrastructure. They definitely have the market share. You know, like you say, I mean, Netflix is just what young people call TV now. Essentially, you know, it's replaced what we all think of as TV. We've spoken before about what the impact would be if Xbox could put Game Pass directly onto televisions or onto a stick that could just plug into the back of a television. Now, if Netflix could offer something like that with their own content or by partnering up with other companies, if they have the streaming capability and could do a deal with a publisher, with Sony even, to put out that kind of content, that could be something really massive. I'm not holding my breath yet, and certainly Google has taught us a lot about not necessarily expecting the world from these big companies, but it could be really interesting.
It absolutely could. I'm so interested in the streaming future that I still believe is coming despite various fuck-ups from Google, but I do believe that it's coming, and I think that the most likely avenue of that streaming future is still Microsoft and is still xCloud, frankly. But heavy hitters coming in like Amazon, who have hopefully learned from the disaster that was Stadia, and if people with platforms the size of Netflix start getting involved here, that's interesting to me. That's something to take note of. I'm not necessarily saying that anything's really going to come of this, to be completely honest. As we said, just reading down the news there, like, this is surface level. These ideas are in flux. They don't even have an executive to oversee this yet. This is very, very early days. But it's very interesting that this is their thought process, you know what I mean, that this is something that they think will be good for them, is to get involved in the video game space. And I think that the company that they are, with the audience that they have, is that they could potentially make quite a big splash here, you know. Alright, let's news item number 2. It appears Valve could be working on a handheld console called the SteamPal. And I hope if they are, they change that name.
Really?
Oh god, it's awful. The rumour is from SteamDB founder Pavel Jundik, I think is how you say that second name, although I could very easily be butchering that, obviously. However, he found a set of strings in a recent Steam client update that seemed to be referencing something called a SteamPal. SteamDB has said that the client update referenced controller bindings, a quick access menu, system settings like airplane mode, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and as well as that, power options. It seems that whatever this project is currently being codenamed Neptune, and apparently there have been references to a Neptune game collection as far back as an update in September. We discussed last week that Valve CEO and founder Gabe Newell seemed to indicate, when asked by a bunch of college kids in New Zealand, that there was some plan for Valve games to come back to the console space. He gave a pretty vague answer when he said, "You will get a better idea of that by the end of the year, and it won't be the answer you expect." And if they are making a console, that definitely isn't the answer I expected, Liz. I can safely admit that. We discussed numerous possibilities about what this might be, and they're making a console. Never came up once. Steam have made hardware before, namely the Steam Link. They've made the Steam Box, the Steam Controller, and most recently the Index VR headset. And I would say the only one of them that was even remotely successful was the Index headset, which does seem to be a very, very good VR headset. It is also worth pointing out that this is a few lines of code in a beta update for the Steam client. This might be nothing at all. This might just be something that they're playing around with. It might never come to light, whatever it is anyway. And even if it does come to light, it might be absolutely nothing like what we're expecting. You know what I mean? We're working on very, very little information here, you know? But nonetheless, this news, combined with Gabe Newell's comments, is quite interesting, right?
Definitely is, yeah. I mean, as you say, of all the possibilities from Gabe Newell's comments last week or so, this never crossed my mind, I don't think. I mean,
not even remotely. Jesus Christ, this was so far from my mind.
And particularly, I guess, because they have tried things like the Steam Box before that just kind of got wound up. And
I mean, let's call it what it was. It totally failed at what it was trying to do. It was trying to make Steam more accessible to gamers. And to be honest with you, I'm the sort of person that would be interested in this. I mean, I don't play a lot of PC games. When I do, it's through a Mac, which is always a fucking nightmare. So if I just had a box, or a handheld, say, that could do that for me, I would be well on board for that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think particularly that idea of a handheld or some sort of Switch style, the ability to swap between docked and handheld for PC games, because of the breadth there that is available on Steam. You can play everything from the smallest indie games and smaller than indie games, really, right up to AAA masterpieces. Having some sort of console option there, some sort of box, some sort of handheld that can run at least some of that stuff, I think is really interesting. And it does, as you say, having a PC that's good enough to play this stuff, it can be difficult to achieve. It can be really expensive to get a PC rig that is advanced enough to play a lot of really top-end Steam games.
I will say that if this is going to turn out to be a handheld, either this is going to be the chonkiest handheld in the world, or this isn't going to be able to play some AAA games that are on Steam,
No, exactly. I mean, if it is handheld, it's going to feel a lot like a Switch, I imagine, in terms of power, or just like a tablet with handles on it, basically.
I mean, I don't think you're massively wrong there. I think it probably is a swanky Switch, basically.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I think that it's Switch that they're coming after here more than anything, because Xbox and PlayStation are sort of doing their own thing parallel with Steam. So if they brought out a handheld, I don't think it would affect the two of them very much at all. Whereas someone like me might choose to play a lot of the indie games or the smaller titles that I would like to play on Switch, just because of portability, because of ease of use. However, if Steam are going to offer that, and I'm getting Steam price stores and not eShop stores,
good point.
The price differential there can be massive, do you know what I mean? So actually, I think it's Nintendo that I've got to watch out. Of course, they've got their own IP there, which will always draw the crowd in every time a Mario or a Zelda game comes out, but I think that it is the Switch, really, that Steam are coming after here, not the other two consoles,
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. And that point about Nintendo's first-party IP is, I think, a really crucial point, because if Steam decide to do this, they do kind of need that as well. They need the games that will tempt people there rather than...
Oh, Lewis, slap Half-Life on it and everyone's there.
Well, that's it, right? So, and, there's been these rumours that, and suggestions from Gabe Newell and others within the company that they got really excited about developing again while making Half-Life Alyx. So, yeah, it does feel to me like they would need something like that, because for the likes of you and I, and for the tens and tens of millions of people who already own a Switch, if they bring that out and it basically just allows you to play a lot of the same indies and smaller games that are on the Switch, then you're not likely to buy it and swap over. But if there is that killer app, the SteamPal's own Breath of the Wild or Mario Odyssey or whatever that gets you into that ecosystem, which, in all likelihood will be a Half-Life game or a Portal game or something of that ilk, I mean, yeah, if Portal 3 was exclusive to the SteamPal, I would buy it immediately,
I'm sure a lot of people would, and particularly if Half-Life 3 was exclusive to the SteamPal, I think everybody would be buying it. I really do hope they change that name if it's real, though.
Just on that, though, that feels so connected to Nintendo, because the phrase SteamPal seems so close to Game Boy that it does feel like a direct attack on Nintendo.
It does feel so Nintendo, but Nintendo have such a different aura and vibe about them as opposed to Steam. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit Steam. I hate it for some reason. Whereas if Nintendo came out with that, I'd be like, brilliant name, nailed it. Alright, loose news item number 3. It seems Konami are planning to outsource IP rather than make games in-house. This follows the announcement of Getsu Fumaden Undying Moon, which is a sequel to a 1987 game released only in Japan, believe it or not. But the reason that this is interesting is because the game was developed by an indie studio called Guru Guru in collaboration with Konami, not by Konami. In an interview with JP Games, Konami's Getsu Fumaden producer Shin Maruto said this:
"We are continually inspired by various indie titles and how they innovate and produce exciting games. We felt that Getsu Fumaden would be an interesting IP to bring back to follow this indie approach, and so we decided to contact Guru Guru, as we know the team well. They had been exploring new approaches for graphical design and thought they would be a great fit for this IP. It also helped that there were fans of the original Getsu Fumaden game within the Guru Guru team. In terms of other collaborations, please wait for future projects like this."
So I think that line is obviously key, do you know what I mean? Also, can I just say, like, this game is not for me because it's a roguelike, but the art style of Getsu Fumadin, I think is absolutely great. I think it looks fantastic. However, Lewis, we also know that Bloober team of the Medium and Layers of Fear fame have all but said that they are working on a Silent Hill game, but we also know that they're not the only ones working on a Silent Hill game. So this isn't even the first time we've heard of them outsourcing their IP, you know? Apparently, Konami used to be pretty reluctant to outsource IP. Specifically, they turned down a pitch from Supermassive of Until Dawn to make a Silent Hill game. However, following disappointing performances from their recent in-house titles, namely Metal Gear Survive and Contra Rogue Core, Konami have since changed their tune, Lewis. But in the VGC article that I am referencing, almost as a throwaway line at the end, which I could not believe, the VGC sources have said that Konami are planning to work on Castlevania and Metal Gear Solid games via external companies, but any release date of them would be years away. I know that there have been rumours swirling around for a long, long time about Silent Hill. It's been for ages now. And I know that there have been some rumblings about Metal Gear Solid and Castlevania to a lesser extent. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the first real, reliable piece of evidence that we have that we might be getting a new Metal Gear Solid game and a Castlevania game down the line at some point. And that is really exciting to me.
It certainly is exciting, yeah. Hopefully
it certainly is exciting. Why is no one else talking about this? And it was such a small paragraph at the end of the article, and I was like, what? This is the story? Why is this not the headline?
I guess too many people have been burned by these rumours for too long.
Oh, well, yeah.
As you say, I mean, this Silent Hill chat has been going on for months and months, possibly into years now, that we've been talking about that and potential rumours around it happening. But yeah, I think you're right that this is an indication that Konami might actually be changing strategy, or already have. You know, they've already understood that they can't really do it the way that they were doing it anymore. I mean, to call Metal Gear Survive a recent game, I mean, it's years old now, and it didn't do anything. You know, it was not successful at all. From that point on, looking at the fact that they held, or still hold, one of the biggest franchises in gaming, probably the most beloved franchise in gaming just about, they have to do something with that. They can't sit on that forever, and they obviously don't have, either they don't have the talent in-house, or they just don't have the ideas in-house, or the kind of commitment to getting those games over the line. This is an indication that they might be starting to make some interesting partnerships and doing some interesting things. So I suspect we'll see a lot more smaller games first, and a lot of other things from the kind of more niche elements of Konami's back catalogue, but it's a good sign.
That is a good sign. My initial thoughts reading the article were, I bet that they're just talking about indie games here, like Getsu Fumadin, like something that no one in the West had ever heard of because it had never been here, is now getting a sequel, which, while cool, is not really what we're wanting, you know what I mean? But then at the end of the article, it was just like, oh, Metal Gear Solid and Castlevania are on the cards here. And I was like, what? Yeah, so that is really incredible news for me anyway. I think that is fantastic. I hope that Konami bring some of these beloved games back. Konami have been the arseholes of the gaming world for a very, very long time now, since all that Kojima stuff. I really hope that they do turn it around, because they own some of the most beloved and most sought-after games in the video game industry. There's such a history there, and I just want them to be back, and I want them to be good Konami again. I want to like Konami, Liz.
Yeah, I just want to like the bloody games, yeah.
Anyway, listen, news item number 4. It has been announced on Twitter by Deep Silver that a new Timesplitters game is coming, loose. Huzzah! What is going on this week? This is incredible. And they have announced that they will be reviving Free Radical Design, the studio that originally made the game. And while it is a new studio, it's so nice to see that name back. It really is. It's a thing of beauty. Anyway, Deep Silver made this statement on Twitter.
You asked and we listened. We've been working on plans to bring the Timesplitters franchise back to life, and are pleased to let you know that we are setting up a new Deep Silver development studio to do just that. Free Radical Design is reforming and will be headed up by industry and Timesplitters veterans Steve Ellis and David Doak. This is an exciting first step in the process. Development on a new game has not yet started, and we will update you when we have more news to share.
Now, they've said that development hasn't started, which means this is almost certainly absolutely miles away. But fucking hell, man. This has been such a long, dormant franchise that we both loved as kids. I have such love for this series that's being revived. Like, how do you feel about this? I don't know if you can tell from my tone, but I am very excited about this.
I can just about tell that, yeah.
This is so good.
Yeah, I think this is great. It's long overdue that Timesplitters came back. There's been so many false dawns. I think we were saying off air, it's been 15 years since Timesplitters Future Perfect came out.
16 years.
16 years.
Lewis.
I mean, Ridiculous. It's just crazy for a series that was really beloved at the time and that was, successful at the time as well. It wasn't like it bombed and that's why it went away. It just fizzled out. And certainly times have moved on, and that is, I guess, one of the key questions around all of this. But just at a top line level, the idea of free radical design coming back and Timesplitters eventually coming back to gamers, I think, is really, really exciting.
Really exciting, man. But you have touched on the point that I was just going to ask you about. How does an extremely arcadey shooter like Timesplitters that was so amazing at the time sit in modern day gaming? Because I'm not really sure I know the answer to that question, frankly, but I hope that they do, and I hope that they do something exciting and cool and creative with the series. I just don't know how it sits next to the likes of Call of Duty and Fortnite and PUBG and Valorant. Is it going to be online? Almost certainly, so it will be competing in those spaces. But a big part of the reason why I think people love Timesplitters was also the single player campaign. So I'm hoping that this isn't just going to turn into a free-to-play loot box fest arena shooter or anything like that. You know what I mean? I'd hate that so much. The campaign needs to be shown the love it deserves, That's really where I'm coming from. That's really, really what I hope that they do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, the thing that I loved about Timesplitters, and for anyone that's not played it, I mean, it is an arcadey shooter. It's a kind of daft, quirky, comedic thing with loads of stupid characters, and, you play as a monkey half the time. There's a guy who's just a hand with a body underneath him. There's all sorts of nonsense. It's that type of thing, and it's
so good, though.
It really sort of feels more connected to older styles of shooting game, like sort of GoldenEye or something like that, than it does to...
I would agree with that, man. I would say that is a really good comparison.
Yeah.
I think that it is closer to GoldenEye than it is to Fortnite.
Yeah, and so maybe that will appeal more to people of a certain vintage, which I guess we have to include ourselves in at this point.
Absolutely, fuck you. I'm a young person and I will not be told differently.
But yeah, I hope that they do find those core elements and use them in this, whatever it is that they're making here. It does feel to me like it has to have a campaign that is a proper story and that is filled with kind of humour and interesting characters and a sort of quirky, cartoony art style maybe. But also it should be fun and fast-paced and action-packed and not really about just having massive arenas the way that a lot of particularly battle royales do at the moment. A map the size of Fortnite's map is nothing like what the maps in the original Timesplitters games were like.
No.
So I hope that they do that, but you're right. I mean, it's hard to imagine how you do this and it's not a free-to-play service game with loot boxes or subscription models packed into it or something like that,
Unless they go down the sort of Deathloop road and just make a campaign.
Yeah.
I can't see them doing that personally. I think that they will take the opportunity to capitalise on the Timesplitters name and try and get some multiplayer going with loot boxes and potentially season passes and all that business. But I just want a campaign. I just want a campaign, man. I don't think that's too much to ask.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, what I was going to ask you there was, do we know yet whether it's definitely a new game and not necessarily remakes of the old ones? Because, I would love to see that, even just a fully remade or remastered package of the original games, and then you would still get your campaign,
I don't suppose that we do know that for certain, to be completely honest, but the vibe that I was getting is that this will be a new thing,
Yeah.
I'm not sure really how well a Timesplitters remake of those old games would do personally, but I think that a new game handled well could be fantastic. I really, really do. Alright, let's finish it off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1, Biomutant has come out this week, but after a lot of hype and a lot of positive buzz, the game has not reviewed well at all, unfortunately. Currently sitting at a 68 on Xbox, a 67 on PC, and a 62 on PS4. It seems genuinely that the combat is good and fun, but unfortunately, I think that that's where the compliments end, sadly. I've heard the word repetitive used a lot to describe this game. It also seems as though the narrative and the RPG mechanics are all pretty underbaked. I know this game was in development hell for a while, and rarely do games come out the other side of that looking spectacular, you know? Honestly, Lewis, and I've heard other people say this as well, but it feels like a small studio with incredible ambitions that I really respect have bit off more than they can chew here. And despite such positive hype, it does seem to have missed the mark, and I really think that that's quite sad for a studio that obviously did have big ambitions. It's a bit of a sad story, this, actually, because so many people are disappointed with this online right now, you know?
Yeah, a lot of disappointment at the state of the game, and also at the review scores that the game's being given. You know, that's the nature of the internet, unfortunately.
Yeah, can I just say, like, don't get upset with people who give a game that you like a review score that you don't agree with. It's just one person's opinion, man. Like, chill.
Or even if it's a lot of people's opinions, you know, if you are someone who's been waiting for this game to come out and you're really excited to play it, then just play it and see what you think of it. And you might agree with them, or you might not.
Man,
you know?
Absolutely. Like we always said here, you know what I mean? Don't be a slave to that Metacritic. If you think that this is going to be a game that you enjoy, it doesn't fucking matter what the score is, as long as you enjoy it. That's all that matters. That's absolutely all that matters.
Absolutely, yeah. I think everything that you've said about it there rings true with what I've seen and read about it in the last few days. It's just a swing and a miss, basically, an overly ambitious project from a small team. And maybe after a bit of time and some patches and a bit of polish, some of the kind of emptiness that the world has, or that repetition, maybe some of that can be resolved, but at the moment it's just not quite where people were hoping it was going to be.
So the developers are a team called Experiment 101, and I genuinely admire their ambition, like I really, really do. I am very interested to see what their next game is. Hopefully they've learned their lessons from Biomutant. Maybe they can rein things in a little bit. Maybe they understand the process a bit better so that they don't get stuck in that development hell business, you know what I mean? And maybe they can come out with something absolutely cracking down the line. But unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be it, which is pretty disappointing. Alright, let's shout out number 2. Knockout City also came out this week. This is the dodgeball game by EA, which is currently sitting with an 82 on PS4, an 88 on Xbox, and a 77 on PC. But as with most games like this, the reviews don't really matter anywhere near as much as how many people are actually playing the game. And as it turns out, this weird dodgeball game has over 2 million players in 3 days, benefiting from a 10-day free trial on all platforms, but it is also available as part of the Games Pass subscription. I have a bunch of friends that are currently playing it, and they are really enjoying it, it seems. So, fair play to EA on taking a risk with this game. I thought that this game was going to do absolutely nothing at all. When I saw trailers for this, I thought that looks horrendous. That looks like nothing that I want anything to do with. And do you know what? It's grabbed a crowd, and fucking fair play to them for that.
If it plays well and it's fun to play, it deserves to get a bit of success, because it's fucking hard to get one of these games to land these days. You know, a lot of good game companies have tried this and not done so well. So if you get 2 million in through
Ubisoft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you get 2 million people through the door to give it a shot, then great. Like, let's hope that it does stick around and that they can keep building on that and it becomes a game that people stick with. You know.
Yeah, and keep coming back to. I know that they're just adding their Season 1 content just now, I think, and obviously they're going to try and build on that. So, yeah, great. I mean, fair play to them. Absolutely fair play to them. Alright, let's shout out number 3. The ex-VP of Monolith, the studio behind the Mordor games, Kevin Stevens, has started a new studio at EA, where he will lead a team making open-world action-adventure games. The studio doesn't even have a name yet, so I think that any games coming out of the studio are going to be a long, long way off. But I would say that this is definitely a studio to keep an eye on. You specifically, out of the two of us, Lewis, really liked the Shadow of Mordor games, or well, at least the first one, before the second one went rapidly downhill. Is this exciting to you?
Yeah, a little bit. As you say, like, I did really like what Shadow of Mordor was doing and felt really disappointed by the direction that Shadow of War went in terms of just kind of going bigger and more, but also stuffing it with pointless activities and
microtransactions was the main thing.
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
One. They were real bad, which sort of killed that franchise that was really good.
Effectively,
actually.
yeah.
It's quite sad actually.
And and that was a franchise that was based around some really smart gameplay ideas. Obviously most notably the Nemesis system, which
absolutely
everyone has spoken at length about. It's a great idea that has been kind of parodied, but I don't think bettered yet by any other big studio. And yeah, so any of the people that were involved in making that are doing something different, I think it's worth taking note of, basically. But yeah, I just find that sometimes we get these sort of new studios form and they've got industry veterans and then you just don't hear anything for a while and it's hard to know what they're going to come up with. But definitely this could be something worth keeping an eye on, I think.
Yeah, exactly as I said, something worth keeping an eye on. They seem to be wanting to make open world action adventure games, which is right up my street. Yeah. So thumbs up for me. Alright, let's shout out number 4. There was a rumour swirling this week as well that Team Ninja of Neo fame are going to be working with Square Enix on a new Final Fantasy game. Team Ninja had previously worked on the Final Fantasy fighting game Descendia NT, but the rumour was that this new game would be a Souls-like game similar to Neo. This rumour has actually been corroborated by Imran Khan over at Fanbyte. His sources seem to suggest that the name will be Final Fantasy Origin and could take place in the same world as the original Final Fantasy game. He also said to expect it to play similarly to Neo, but more accessible for a wider audience, which immediately makes me think of Jedi Fallen Order, which was Souls-inspired, but in reality much easier in order to captivate that wider audience, He also said that Final Fantasy Origin would be a big part of Square Enix's E3 presentation, which means that we might not have to wait that long to find out what this game is all about, So, Lewis, for me, this is pretty cool, like it a lot. And it's really interesting to see Final Fantasy going in a different direction. I sort of lost interest in the Final Fantasy series when they started to go in a bit DMC with their combat rather than the old menu-driven combat, which I absolutely love and still continue to love. I would much rather see them go in the direction of Final Fantasy VII, where it's a sort of hybrid of the two, where you do have sort of DMC-style combat, but menu-driven elements that sort of pay homage to those old games. Or I would much rather see them go down the combat of a Souls-like rather than DMC. That's just personal preference on my part, but this, to me, is very exciting.
Yeah, it feels to me like a really smart pairing up of different types of games. It might be a bit simple right now to just refer to it as like Final Fantasy Souls kind of thing, but if that is the expertise that's coming over from Team Ninja and that is the type of game that they're looking to do with it, the crossover there seems to me quite exciting because, Final Fantasy has huge support and has done so many different types of ideas over its history, so many different... and there's been so many spin-offs as well that we barely talk about. So Final Fantasy is absolutely a series that can sustain having spin-off games like this or games that just try something completely different. And obviously Souls games are just the big thing right now. They're the biggest kind of innovation in the last few years in terms of what players are into. So
in terms of action games like that, in terms of combat, which is really what we're talking about with a Souls-like game, I suppose in the sort of 3D Metroidvania style levels and that sort of combat, and it's the combat that I think most people think of immediately, certainly what I think of immediately. And that in a Final Fantasy game, that's awesome.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, let's hope we do see this at E3. I think that would be a pretty colossal announcement.
I would agree, man. That'd be fucking great. Alright, and final shout out number 5. PlayStation are having a state of play for Horizon Forbidden West on Thursday, the day that this podcast comes out, ladies and gentlemen. It will be showing 14 minutes of brand new gameplay, which I am very much looking forward to seeing. However, you, dear listener, may indeed know more about Horizon Forbidden West than the Mark and Lewis in this timeline. But Lewis, there is a Dying Light 2 showcase on the same day. This game has been in development hell, I think we can say again, but I really like the concept. I think that the concept of this game is really cool, so I hope that they pull through and they produce a great game at the end. They have previously said that they are planning to release the game this year, but maybe we'll find out if that's actually going to be true in this presentation on Thursday. But Lewis, also on Thursday, just before we started recording, it was announced that there will be a Sonic showcase as well. This because Sonic turns 30 this year, believe it or not. So, yeah, that's just another thing that we're going to miss. And we might talk about it next week.
Yeah, big day for news coming up on Thursday. So hopefully...
Definitely is. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, hopefully we'll all have some pretty interesting stuff to bring up next week on the show. But yeah, really excited to see more of Horizon Forbidden West. And also it feels quite similar to what they've done with Ratchet & Clank recently, and also the kind of gameplay demo that they put out of The Last of Us Part 2, which was just a few weeks before that game launched as well. So, I don't know, interested by the timing of all this. It's right before the E3 slot, it's right on the heels of Ratchet & Clank. You know, it's eating up Ratchet & Clank's space in the same way that they did with Ratchet & Clank and Returnal. Could it be, Mark? Could it be coming sooner rather than later?
Nah.
Nah, I don't think so either.
Honestly,
to be honest.
like, people keep on going on about this on the internet. Like, this is their big AAA game of the year. It's going to be coming out in the, quotes, holiday window before Christmas. That's when it's going to come out. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but that is my personal opinion. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if we didn't get a date. I'm hoping for a date. I'm very much hoping for a date. But I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they didn't give a date, because I think due to COVID and various other things, I'm not sure that they have had the opportunity to develop the game as much as they would have liked. Therefore, if this game gets pushed to 2022, that sort of wouldn't really surprise me, to be completely honest. All right, Lewis, and on that note, time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is 10 things we have learned from 100 episodes of PlayersToo, Lewis. It's our 100th episode, Lewis.
It is indeed, yeah. Congratulations on making it this far, Mark.
Congratulations to you too as well. And congratulations, dear listeners, for making it this far.
Yeah, if you've been with us since the very start, since the middle of 2019, basically, we've been doing this since pretty much 2 years now. And yeah, so we just thought we would end this week's show with a bit of chat about what that's been like and what we've kind of learned about ourselves as gamers and as people who have kind of jumped into the gaming industry a bit and started a podcast. And yeah, it's been a kind of mad couple of years in all sorts of ways, but yeah, I think we've probably learned some things that are worth mentioning.
I hope so. Certainly over 2 years, yeah. Do you want to kick us off, Liz?
Yeah, sure, yeah. So I guess
to be clear, we're doing 5 each. We're not doing 10 each.
No, exactly, yeah. This will still be your regular length section of Topic of the Week. But yeah, so I guess one of my first ones is just that I have learned from doing this that I am absolutely hopeless at predicting Game Awards.
Oh, I love that one so much.
We have now done...
Well, Liz, one of mine is that I'm really good at it.
Perfect. Yeah, we've now done 4 of these prediction bets, and I have done pretty terribly. Well, I've lost 3 of them. Some of them were a bit closer than others. But really what I kind of wanted to say about that, actually, is that doing that kind of thing, setting wee challenges like that, and having a bit of friendly competition through this kind of medium of the podcast has just meant that I have actually been made to play, or will be soon made to play, a lot of games that I want to play. Like, I think that should be mentioned. I don't think you would ever set me something that you think that I would hate to play.
No, I wouldn't.
But it means that there are things that I have been meaning to get round to and might never have got to, that doing this has helped with. But I do wish I was just a little bit better at picking some of those winners.
Yeah, so just to be clear, me and Lewis have a bet over the predictions of the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley's Game Awards, and the DICE Awards each year. We've done this, well, we've done each twice, so that's 4 overall, and I've won 3, and you've won only 1, Lewis.
Only 1.
So, yeah, and it's been a clean sweep in 2020 for old Mark here, so yeah. Alright, Lewis, one of mine is that I have learned that I basically value narrative and storytelling in games above all else. I've always sort of known this about myself, I would say. But even if your graphics aren't great or your gameplay's a bit janky or whatever, see if you're telling me an interesting story, I'm probably there for it. Because for me, I think that I've learned that is where a lot of the artistry in video games comes from me anyway, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that probably goes for both of us, but narrative games, I think to you and I, are the kind of core of what we enjoy about gaming. It's
definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely a growing storytelling medium, and it's really exciting at this point in time in the kind of life cycle of gaming that it is really expanding in that front. You know, games with stories are just getting more rich and more complex, and hopefully will continue to do so for quite a long time.
Absolutely, and just doing more interesting things, telling more interesting stories, telling more impactful stories. And I just love that we're seeing gaming grow in that way, and it really is continuing to surge in narrative and again becoming an incredible storytelling medium that I just think is amazing.
Yeah. Another one for me, a thing that I've definitely learned about myself, particularly in the last year, I suppose, is that I think that I am much more of a social gamer than I ever realised, but I never, ever play any video games online, Mark.
I'm not even sure what you mean about that, because I think you're one of the most antisocial gamers I know.
Well, that's really interesting, but basically what I do mean by it, and yeah, I don't play multiplayer games online, I don't really do any of that stuff, and in that sense, I'm definitely an antisocial gamer, but I have realised that I just definitely prefer playing games with someone sat next to me. Now, historically, Mark, that has been you for decades now. That has been you that I have sat next to and played all sorts of games with. But even just in the last few years, you know, sitting with my flatmate who I played a lot of games with, I've noticed that I am just much more engaged and willing to play and kind of excited to play games when there's someone else there. And that's partly like just being able to share that experience and, you know, and laugh or shout at it or whatever. But I think there is something just about enjoying this hobby, not just as a totally isolated thing. And it's another big passion of mine is reading, and that can be a very solitary thing, but going out and talking to people about that is often what makes it better. And that's something that this podcast has allowed me to do even in the pandemic, is just to continue talking to you and to our listeners about games, which I couldn't really have done. And I wonder, if we didn't do this, what my gaming habits would be like in the past year had I not had someone else there as well to play alongside. So yeah, I think couch co-op gaming, even if it's just passing the controller on a single player game, is really important to me, actually.
That's awesome, man. And sadly, something that we seem to be lacking greatly in this day and age is just awesome couch co-op games. Well, something else that I've learned about myself, I was sort of thinking about what do I enjoy most in games, and I was thinking to myself, oh, well, that's the story. And then I was thinking, well, what do I enjoy the most in game design? And really that is, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but the Metroidvania style game and in level design, I love it. I never knew that I loved it so much, but really, and I sort of credit Hollow Knight for this more than anything, to be honest with you, but done well, it is such an incredible way to design a world that feels incredibly cohesive. And if it's done well, the same areas of the map can feel totally different depending on the mechanics that change throughout the game. I just love that because it makes you feel as though you're actually there in this world, whatever it may be, whether it's the world of Hollow Knight or the world of Bloodborne or the world of Metroid or the world of Castlevania. Do you know what I mean? It just feels like a cohesive place that you are. It feels like a real place. You're not going from level to level to level to level or stage to stage or whatever. You are in this sort of microcosm, and I think that if a Metroidvania is done well, it is almost the pinnacle of game design. Like, I really do. It is so good at building a world, I think. Not necessarily even talking about like big lavish open worlds like Assassin's Creed or something like that. Like, I'm talking about even like the world of like Resident Evil Village. Like, I think that the way that game was designed cleverly, using Metroidvania style design, was part of the reason why that game felt as good as it did, you know. And I just know in myself now, having played a lot more of that type of game and having done this podcast sort of forcing me to play more games, as you were sort of getting onto a little bit on your point, I've really learned that in myself. And through Metroidvania, I actually have began to really appreciate like other aspects of game design as well, like even roguelikes and stuff like that, which I have said numerous times on very recent podcasts that is not really my thing. But even in that, you can see the skill in it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that so much expands out from Metroidvanias that you can see little bits in it, and I do think that a lot of games at their hearts can almost be reduced down to it in a lot of ways. I hope that I'm not just going on about like every game's a Metroidvania, because that's really not what I mean, but I just love it, and it's sort of given me a passion for like level design and game design in general, which I have subsequently taken further a lot of the time, and just like with my own passion just decided I really want to learn about X thing.
Yeah.
It really is because of the fact that I fell in love with the Metroidvania type games, and I was like, well, why are these games so good? And then I'd subsequently done hours and hours of unnecessary research to find out why. So yeah, it's just playing more games, finding out what games you love and being passionate about them, I suppose, is just what this podcast has really done for me, I suppose, in the sort of wider spectrum, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important, and finding those sort of areas of gaming that you particularly enjoy is such a great thing. I'll add one in that kind of builds on that a wee bit more, and it's just that what I've noticed as well about my own gaming habits over the last couple of years is that I really want to find more time, and have been finding more time at certain points, to play games that I just purely enjoy. That might sound daft because like you should enjoy everything that you're playing to a certain extent, but I just remember, like, we were talking about Timesplitters earlier, and I was thinking off air when thinking about this whole section about when I was a kid and I would play something like Pro Evolution Soccer endlessly for hours, or even like a couple of years ago when I'd play Football Manager and stuff like that and just get really sunk into. And I was thinking back to sort of this time last year, I guess, when I was playing XCOM Chimera Squad, and just found this game that, like, as we always say, don't be a slave to the Metacritic. Like, that game didn't review particularly well, but I just fucking loved it, and I loved playing it, and I loved the headspace that it put me in. And I think that as well, for anyone listening who, it can become so easy, and probably by listening to a show like ours, you know, we're probably contributing to a certain extent. It can be so easy to get caught up in the new thing. I've got to play the next big thing. I've got to play all the big games, constantly got to be kind of chasing that. And actually, sometimes I think it's really important, if you just love gaming, to find those games that might be a bit daft or might just not be perfect in any sense, but that you just really actually enjoy playing, that put you in a good mood when you play them. A bit like what you were saying about Metroidvanias there, finding that thing that just gets you into the groove and that just makes you enjoy the time that you're spending in it, I think is really, really important. And I hope people, through listening to us and through all the gaming podcasts or media that you consume, are finding stuff that you just fucking enjoy. You don't have to justify it by any other means, you know?
No, absolutely. And you never have to justify something that you enjoy playing. Do you know what I mean? Whether it has a 6 on Metacritic or it's a 10 out of 10 on Metacritic, yeah. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, it's absolutely irrelevant if it's a game that you enjoy playing. It's sort of what we were talking about earlier in both of the games that came out this week. Biomutant came out and it really didn't review very well with critics, but as we always say, and I know that we do contribute towards this a little bit, but we do always say, don't be a slave to that Metacritic. If this looks like a game that you're going to enjoy, then it doesn't fucking matter what that score is. It's completely irrelevant what that score is. Totally pointless if you're enjoying the experience of playing the game. And similarly with Knockout City, the review scores of that game are completely redundant. 2 million people are playing it. What fucking difference does it make how well it scored?
Exactly.
It doesn't matter in the slightest. 2 million people are enjoying playing that game. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. I suppose sort of building on that again, one thing that I will say that I love about this podcast is our PlayAlong games.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I absolutely love our PlayAlong games. I've always loved indie games and I've always been quite passionate about indie games, but in doing the play-alongs, it has made me appreciate them even more, I think. But also, I think for indies, it's quite easy to say, oh, I'll get to that eventually. Do you know what I mean? That's a shorter title, I'll get to that whenever, and it sits there for years and you've never played it, you know what I mean? And I think that is particularly easy to do when it comes to indies, like I said. But the fact that the play-alongs sort of force me, for lack of a better term, to play an indie game once per month is just great. Like, if I'm playing one indie game per month, I think that is fucking awesome. Hopefully I'm averaging more than that over a year, to be honest, but I just think that's great. It's got to be playing so much more indie games than otherwise would have done. Yeah, I love that part of the show, and I really hope that people do play along with us and take our recommendations when we say that some of these indie games are really, really fantastic. Like, some of my favourite games ever are indie games. I just mentioned Hollow Knight. That's an indie game and is one of, I would argue, literally one of the best games ever made. I just want more people to be interested in development of that kind, that is trying to do something different or more interesting, or trying to tell a story that just wouldn't work in a AAA space. And that's the thing that I don't think a lot of people realise, is that I think when people say indie games, a lot of people necessarily think that they're getting a lesser experience, and that is just not true in modern indie games. It is not true at all. Some of the best experiences I've ever had playing video games has come from indie games.
100%. I mean, I more or less have the same thing written as part of my list, that the play-along games and just indie games generally are some of the most enjoyable things that I've played in the last year or two. Hands down, no doubt, some of the most impactful games I've ever encountered. So if you haven't been playing along with us, go back, listen to some of those episodes, check out some of the games that we've been playing if you haven't, because you'll definitely find some stuff that you love amongst them as well. There's so many good games in that list. Okay, another one for me. Just from doing this podcast, I have spent a lot more time online and online gaming communities and that kind of thing, because obviously we run social media channels alongside this and we have to communicate with other gamers and other content creators and stuff like that online, which is not something that I was ever really doing around gaming before this. And I just want to say that, like, it's easy, and certainly I was the kind of person before who was maybe a little bit embarrassed to be a gamer, to talk about gaming in a big public way. I don't necessarily tell people right away before doing this how much I actually do play video games. It was a sort of lesser part, a slightly more hidden part of my personality. And I just think that obviously there's some toxic shit out there, and there's no denying that aspects of the gaming community online can be bad. But some things about the gaming community are so profoundly important and exciting and positive and progressive that I just think that should be said. Like, that is a thing that I've been exposed to so much more in the last couple of years through doing this, just how good people can be and how gaming can bring them together. And I know that sounds like schmaltzy rubbish, but genuinely I think that I have been surprised to find how positive and mature and interesting and engaging a lot of this whole kind of sector or subspecies of people, how important that can be. And yeah, I just think that should be celebrated more, because I imagine there are plenty more people out there like me who are a little bit sheepish about talking about games, and they really, really need to not be.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I basically don't tell anyone that I'm a gamer even now unless they basically ask, and I have a gaming podcast. So yeah, it's a bit of a bizarre one, that, to be honest with you. It's sort of paradox that we speak so publicly about video games and that anyone can access this content right now for free. But face to face, it seems to be like a different thing. But yeah, I again, similar to you, since doing this podcast, have been a lot more open about the fact, no, I am a gamer and I'm part of this community, which actually by and large is pretty awesome. And again, there is toxic shit out there, but I mean, gamers in general are fantastic and great people, and really appreciate, again, it's like about appreciating the artistry for me of the games. And there's just so many people like that out there, you know. One for me is that I absolutely love doing research for this show list. I absolutely fucking love it. Editing, not so much, but the research part of the show, I really, really like. I like it a lot. I genuinely enjoy like digging through articles, and more to the point, like finding background information on stuff that is said in the articles that I might not be necessarily familiar with, and like going down Wikipedia rabbit holes and looking at, I don't know, IGN articles from 20 years ago to try and figure out context for things. Like, I absolutely fucking love that, and I find it so fascinating, half the stuff I stumble across. To be honest with you, I'm so glad that I do enjoy that, because if I didn't, I do not know how this podcast would be keeping going right now. But yeah, I have found a real love for like video game history, but also just any sort of weird things about video games and how they're made and how the industry works and how dev teams work, or how certain things came to be within video games. It's just all just so fascinating to me, and I just love finding that stuff out, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. Similarly, I had a thing on my list that was basically, there are times that I enjoy talking and reading about and watching stuff about games as much, if not sometimes more, than I enjoy playing the games. You know, the culture around it is so rich.
Absolutely. I would never admit anything so blasphemous as that, but yes, I do sort of agree.
So I guess one last one from me, and again, maybe on a slightly schmaltzy note, but it is so genuinely rewarding to me to know that people listen to us and that they engage with us. And that goes for, as you say every week, everyone who writes a review, obviously, and anyone who comments on our stuff online or whatever. But just even right at the start, I had friends who started listening, and they would start texting me looking for advice about which consoles to get, or friends who have sort of got more into gaming through listening to us, I think, and asking for recommendations or picking up games that we've enthused about at the top of the show each week. I never thought when we started doing this that it would kind of matter that much, and it really, really does. I mean, you get to say it each week, but it really does mean so much that people tune in and give some time to us and listen to just two guys in Glasgow talking about video games each week.
Yeah, I mean that is fucking incredible, quite frankly. And I mean, anyone that listens to us at all, know that we appreciate you so much. Like, we genuinely do, and it is so rewarding to know that people tune in every week to, again, as you said, listen to two guys in Glasgow talk about video games. You know, it's fantastic. I suppose my final one is more about podcasting itself. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people out there maybe sort of dabble and think about doing a podcast, or maybe it's YouTube or whatever, and they maybe like put themselves off for whatever reason But just go for it, man. Absolutely just go for it. If you want to do a podcast, like, can I just say, I might be giving you a look behind the curtain here, but podcasting is not that hard. And some people online make you think that it is hard, but honestly, it's really, really not. Get yourself a decent mic, have a structure for your podcast. It doesn't have to be like, our structure is actually relatively rigid, but it can be way looser than what we do. Have a plan for your episodes. Make sure that you're always talking about something and you're not rambling. I would highly recommend that anyone edits their episodes. We edit our podcast relatively heavily, and you do not have to edit your podcast anywhere near as much as we do. But more importantly, like, don't be afraid to put your voice out there. It can be intimidating at first. I know that it was intimidating for me. I certainly felt that way when we first started doing this. But honestly, that intimidation goes very, very quickly indeed. Or it certainly did for me anyway. I don't know how you feel, but don't be afraid to get your voice out there. Like, you will find people that agree with you. You will hopefully find communities that agree with you and that you can be part of. And that, I think, is awesome. And I hope that we sort of contribute to that a little bit. Do you know what I mean? I hope that when people listen to us, they think, oh, well, I listen to those guys because they speak their minds about things, but they do it in a hopefully concise way, and certainly more concise way than I'm making this point. But yeah, and you sort of vibe with us, do you know what I mean? And I hope that that comes across, that we are being genuine. And I think that as long as you're doing that, don't be afraid to get your voice out there, because unless you're an absolute arsehole, which I'm sure you're not, dear listener, like, people will listen to you because it takes courage to get your voice out there in the first place. So even in doing that, you will garner respect.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, whether that is in the gaming sphere or anything else that you're passionate about, I think that if you speak authentically, if you mean what you say and that you're genuine about it, no matter what it is, if you love a thing, if you care about a thing and you do something around that to bring that to other people, there's so many other people out there like that, no matter what it is. Even if your interests are super weird, you will find some people who are similarly weird, and that is a good feeling. So definitely do it if you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. No such thing as too many podcast lists. No such thing as too many podcasts. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And on our 100th episode, if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts, that would genuinely, hugely mean a lot. Like, it really would help us out. It does only take you 5 seconds, and it does genuinely mean a lot to us. So thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. As we said, it makes a huge difference to the show, and we do appreciate it so much. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Katana Zero, which I am very much looking forward to talking about, Lewis.
Yeah, coming up just next week. I am going to rattle through it again for the second time this week, and I'm really looking forward to spending some more time in that game. I really enjoyed it the first time round, so looking forward to talking about it.
No spoilers for the episode list. We need to talk about it in episode. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.